Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get updates to the forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out for your area. Also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, getting updates to the forecast through that means as well. Starting off, we're going to take a quick look at some of the rain totals that we had in southeast Alaska. Now, this is going through the heaviest portions of the rain, which ended yesterday evening, so Saturday evening in time in the 24 hours preceding that. In Shelter Cove, we had rain amounts up to 2.72 inches in that 24-hour period. Sitka, we had 1.78, and Juneau, 1.70. Craig also saw quite a bit, 1.87. Beaver Falls Powerhouse up to 2.43. And some of the lower end we had down there at Hoona at 0.84 and Wrangell at 0.82. Haines only at 0.69. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we'll see one of the lingering lows that's out over the eastern portion of the Gulf of Alaska, still bringing in a little bit of showers out to the Panhandle area at this time. Up north over the south central area, high pressure is dominating, keeping that area void of a lot of the cloud cover right now. And then as we look up to the north, we have a low pressure system moving towards the northwest coastline, bringing in some colder air up there, but also some precip along the west coast of the state, extending into some of the interior as well. And then finally, down by the Aleutian Islands, we can see two lows south of the island chain right now, bringing up some moisture and some rain to areas of the Aleutians as well as into the Bering Sea. Taking a look now at the weather for the remainder of the day, we'll stay down south in the Aleutian Islands area. We have those two systems coming in, bringing rain from the eastern Aleutians through the western Aleutians and a lot of the southern locations of the Bering Sea, especially for central and western locations. Ridging out ahead of those systems, however, is keeping the Alaska Peninsula dry, as well as Kodiak Island and portions of southwest Alaska. But as we get to the YK Delta area, we're starting to see more and more rain, and that's going to mix with fog for the Norton Sound area through the Kotzebue Sound area, as well as much of the northern portions of the interior. Rain making it into the central portions of the interior as well. In the Brooks Range, still cold enough to see some snow at the higher elevations, and then rain along much of the north slope with some areas of fog in the Beaufort Sea. Down south in the Panhandle area, we are seeing some of those lingering rain showers, especially for the central and northern locations and areas closer to the coastal mountains. As we move into tonight, we are going to see some of that diminish as high pressure gets closer towards the Panhandle area. However, there will still be some of those rain showers in more of the inside waters and nearest to the coastal mountains. That high pressure is also along the North Gulf Coast, leaving south central Alaska still out of the precipitation for tonight. However, as we get to the Alaska Range, we're going to start to see some of that rain in higher elevations, some snow. And then in the interior, we're going to see a lot of rain and starting to get some fog as we get closer towards the Brooks Range and northern portions of the interior, including Yukon Flats area, out west all the way to the Seward Peninsula area, as well as the Norton and Kotzebue Sounds. As we get into the Brooks Range, we're going to see some colder temperatures and more snow, especially at the higher elevations, and a mix of rain and snow for the North Slope area, as our frontal system is pushing into the northwestern portions of the state. Down along the west coast, we're going to start to clear up as we finally get closer towards the Bristol Bay area. But out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, our low that was south of the eastern Aleutians is now pushed into the southern Bering Sea, bringing rain throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutians, and starting to push in some of that rain to the Alaska Peninsula. As we move into Monday, that low is going to continue to push rain farther to the east, extending rain just to the coastline of southwest Alaska, as well as throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. High pressure will have continued to shift farther to the east, now over the Gulf of Alaska area, keeping south central Alaska dry, with rain on its way towards Kodiak, but still should be fairly dry for Monday. That ridging is also going to help to clear out the Panhandle area on Monday, where we do have those rain showers pushed off to the south and east of the area. As we move up farther north in mainland Alaska, from the Alaska Range north, we will have rain throughout the interior, along much of the west coast from the Norton Sound north, through the Brooks Range and much of the North Slope area. Still going to see some of the higher elevations in the Brooks Range as snow, and then some areas just off the coastline starting to mix with snow near the Dead Horse area. Moving into Tuesday, high pressure is going to start to clear out some of the precipitation far up north, but we will still have some lingering rain and snow showers far in the eastern portions near Kaktovik, as well as in the Brooks Range and areas farther to the south. You're going to see rain, spotty rain throughout much of the interior, starting to get a little bit heavier as we get to the west coast of the state and down through southwest Alaska. We will have a new system coming in from the south headed towards Kodiak Island from the North Pacific that is going to bring some rain to Kodiak Island, as well as starting to make it into the Kenai Peninsula throughout the day on Tuesday. To the west, we have low pressure out over the Bering Sea, continuing to bring widespread rain throughout the Bering, Aleutian Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. Our ridging that was over south central Alaska is pushed even farther to the east now on Tuesday, over the eastern portions of the Gulf, keeping the panhandle clear of precipitation and should clear out some of the cloud cover as well on Tuesday. Taking a look at our temperatures, starting with our low temps on Monday morning, we are in the panhandle area going to drop down into the mid to upper 40s most locations. Sitka staying a little bit warmer there at 50 degrees, and Yakutat dropping down to 42. For south central Alaska, most locations are going to drop down to the lower to mid 40s. A little bit colder in the Copper River Basin, Golcana getting down to 31. Monday afternoon in the Panhandle, getting up into the lower 60s throughout all locations. And for south central Alaska, lower to mid 60s, getting warmer as we get closer towards the Gulf of Alaska. Kodiak Island down there getting up to 62. Tuesday morning lows starting off in the Panhandle area, dropping back down into the mid to upper 40s, still a little bit warmer at Sitka. And then in the south central area, dropping down to the 40s, a little bit warmer there at Anchorage, actually only dropping down to 49 degrees, 36 for Golcana, and 50 degrees for Kodiak City. Tuesday afternoon high temperatures in the Panhandle getting up into the lower to mid 60s, and then right around 60 degrees for the Kenai Peninsula, lower 60s as we get farther to the north, and 65 for the Copper River Basin. Moving up into the northern portions of the state, staying in the interior for these low temperatures on Monday morning, dropping down into the 40s throughout the interior. A little bit warmer as we get closer towards the Norton Sound area, around 50 degrees there. Up along the Arctic coastline, dropping down into the 30s, with Utqiagvik getting down to freezing. Monday afternoon high temperatures for the interior get up into the mid 50s. Closer to 50 degrees along the west coast and the upper 40s for the Kotzebue Sound area, and then into the 30s for western Arctic coast, and then 40s for the eastern side. Tuesday morning lows in the interior dropping down into the 40s, 40s along the west coast as well, and in the 30s along the north slope. Tuesday afternoon highs in the interior getting up into the 60s, warmest in the southeastern locations, only in the 50s as we get farther to the west, and lower 50s as we get to the west coast. Up along the Arctic coastline, dropping down into the 40s. Monday morning lows for southwest Alaska going to drop down into the 40s, then near 50 degrees for the Aleutian Islands. Monday afternoon highs getting up around 60 degrees for southwest Alaska, and in the mid to upper 50s for the Aleutians. Tuesday morning lows dropping down into the upper 40s for southwest Alaska, and near 50 to lower 50s for the Aleutians. For Tuesday afternoon highs getting up around 60 degrees for southwest Alaska, and in the mid to upper 50s for the Aleutian Islands, with 56 at St. Paul.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For aviation, we'll start off with a look at our flying weather on Monday morning. Out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, primarily going to see IFR conditions, especially for central and western locations. Then we'll start to see some MVFR conditions as we move closer towards the Alaska Peninsula and southwest Alaska. As we get up towards the Norton Sound and Seward Peninsula, IFR conditions are going to be dominant, and that's going to extend out through much of the western and central interior, with MVFR conditions farther to the east. Up along the Arctic coastline, MVFR conditions are expected, but we are going to see some VFR conditions down in south central Alaska, and then MVFR for much of the Panhandle. As we move into Monday afternoon, MVFR conditions are going to be located in the southern portions of the Panhandle, with VFR conditions farther to the north and extending out those VFR conditions along the North Gulf Coast throughout south central. Kodiak Island will see some MVFR conditions, and then we're going to start to see primarily IFR as we move out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. Southwest Alaska primarily VFR, however some areas of MVFR along the YK Delta coastline. Up in the interior, primarily MVFR, and then going to start to see some more IFR conditions as we move farther to the west. And we are going to see IFR conditions throughout the Kotzebue Sound area as well as the Seward Peninsula. Up along the Arctic coastline, we are going to see primarily MVFR conditions to the far eastern locations where we'll see some IFR. Tuesday morning, staying up on the Arctic coast, we're going to see primarily MVFR conditions, once again IFR as we get farther to the east. In the northern portions of the interior, mixture of MVFR and IFR with more IFR as we get to central and western locations. Those IFR conditions are going to extend out through the Seward Peninsula and for the St. Lawrence Island area. Down the west coast, we're going to see some MVFR conditions for southwest Alaska, especially near to the coast, and then primarily IFR for the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. For south central and the Panhandle, we are expecting VFR conditions Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon, going to continue to see VFR conditions for the Panhandle and south central Alaska. Northern portions of the interior, primarily MVFR, and it's going to extend up to the Arctic coastline with some isolated areas of IFR expected. Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands expecting to be primarily IFR. Looking through the passes, AKwx should be IFR all day on Monday, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill should be a little bit different here, as Lake Clark will be VFR throughout the day. Merrill will be MVFR improving to VFR in the afternoon. Rainy Pass will start off MVFR improving to VFR later in the day. Windy will be MVFR throughout the day on Monday. Isabel Pass should be VFR all day Monday, as well as Mentasta. Tenita Pass will also be VFR on Monday, and the same for Portage. Down in southeast Alaska, Chilkoot and White should both be VFR throughout the day Monday. Taking a look at our freezing levels, our surface freezing line will be just off the Arctic coastline. Then we'll see freezing levels quickly getting up to around 6,000 feet as we get into the interior, and between 8,000 and 10,000 feet as we get over south central Alaska. Going to see some of those 10,000 foot freezing levels extending out over much of the Aleutian Islands as well. For our icing, with the colder temperatures up north, that is where we expect to see our icing as well. It's going to start off below 3,000 feet for our northwest coastline, but jump up and eventually be above 3,000 feet as we get closer towards the Kaktovik area on Monday. For our jet stream on Monday, strongest portion of the jet over our area is going to be out over northwestern portions of the state up to as high as 80 knots out of a northwesterly direction, continuing that northwest flow over much of the mainland, then becoming northerly out over the Panhandle area and the southern portions of the Panhandle up to as high as 80 knots out of that northerly direction. Some weaker winds out near the Aleutian Islands, only around 60 knots or so out of a westerly direction, and then stronger portions of the jet are going to be over the North Pacific south of the Aleutian Islands. At 9,000 feet, we are expecting west to southwest winds over the Aleutian Islands up to as high as 35 knots near the eastern Aleutians and 25 knots out by the Pribilof Islands. Southern portions of the mainland will be fairly calm, and then we'll see some stronger winds up near the Brooks Range out of a northwesterly direction around 40 knots, and then still around 35 knots over the eastern portions of the interior. Out over the Panhandle area, weaker winds up north, but picking up as we go farther to the south, getting up to as high as 25 knots out of the north. Then down to 3,000 feet, winds are going to drop off quite a bit for the Panhandle area. It'll be all below 20 knots there. Almost calm for much of the south central area. We're going to see a little bit of increase of winds out over the northern portions of the interior out of a west to southwest direction, around 30 knots from most locations of that northern interior, extending out closer towards the Seward Peninsula area. Along the Arctic coastline, pretty calm up there as well. Stronger portion of winds just to the north of the Pribilof Islands, around 30 knots out of a southerly direction. That's going to extend out over the Alaska Peninsula as well. Finally, for our turbulence, we are not expecting any significant turbulence on Monday.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the hazardous weather test bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the marine section of the forecast. We'll start off with a look at our ice edge. We still have ice near the coast with some of the more lesser concentration areas east of UAFTV and moving out towards just to the west of Kaktovik area. For the marine forecast down in southeast Alaska on Monday, in the inside waters, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. And in the Gulf of Alaska, we do have northwest winds 10 to 15 knots as well. On Tuesday, still light winds in most locations inside waters, northwest winds around 10 knots. Out over the Gulf waters, weak up northwest winds 10 knots, picking up to 15 to 20 knots out of the northwest in the eastern portions of the Gulf. For south central Alaska, Monday, weak winds, 10 knots in most locations, somewhat variable. In the areas that do have a direction, like around the Barren Islands area, we're going to see westerly winds around 15 knots. Then on Tuesday, flow switching up and increasing, becoming more easterly, 25 to 30 knots around the Barren Islands area, 20 to 25 knots in northern portions of the Gulf, and then becoming weaker in Prince William Sound, east winds 10 knots there, and then in Cook Inlet area, northerly winds 10 to 15 knots. Seas up to as high as 10 feet, highest east of the Barren Islands. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, starting around Kodiak Island, west to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. For the Alaska Peninsula, we're seeing south to southeasterly winds, 10 to 15 knots in eastern locations, 20 knots as we get closer towards Sandpoint and Cold Bay. On Tuesday, flow switching up to be more easterly or northeasterly around Kodiak Island, 30 knots there, 15 to 20 knots as we start to get into the eastern portions of the Alaska Peninsula, and then becoming more southerly as we get closer toward the western portions of the peninsula, 15 knots expected. For the Aleutian Islands on Monday, for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, we're looking at southerly winds 20 to 25 knots. Then for the western Aleutians, east to southeast, 15 knots expected. On Tuesday, most locations are going to see west to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, becoming more southerly by the eastern Aleutians, 15 knots there. And then at northerly winds by the far western Aleutians, around 15 knots. Along the west coast of the state, somewhat of a southerly direction, 15 to 20 knots. Hugging along the coastline, becoming more easterly by St. Matthew Island, 20 knots there, and then southeast winds 25 knots by the Pribilof Islands, seas up to as high as 7 feet there. On Tuesday, flow becoming much more pure easterly, 5 knots in the Norton Sound area, 15 to 20 knots elsewhere, except for the Pribilof Islands where variable winds 10 knots are expected. Along the Arctic coastline, starting in eastern portions, northeast winds 15 knots, diminishing and becoming more variable around 5 knots, and then eventually becoming northerly along the west coast, 10 to 15 knots expected, until we get south of the Bering Strait where we'll have southwest winds 15 knots. On Tuesday, along the Arctic coast, west to southwest winds 10 knots is expected, east to southeast along the west coast 10 to 15 knots, and that's going to extend through the Bering Strait area. For a recap of our weather for tonight, we have low pressure system moving into the southern portions of the Bering Sea, pushing rain to most locations of the Bering and Aleutians, as well as the Alaska Peninsula and Pribilof Islands. A little bit drier by southwest Alaska until we get to the Yukon Delta area, where we'll have rain extending up the west coast and throughout the interior, starting to mix with fog by closer towards the Seward Peninsula and northern locations of the interior, and then a mix of rain and snow for the Brooks Range, as well as much of the North Slope, as we have a system moving in from the west through the North Slope area. High pressure is going to dominate the south central area, keeping the area dry tonight, and we will still have some lingering showers in southeast Alaska, especially in the inside waters and closer to the coastal mountains. As we move into Monday, we are going to have conditions drying up in the Panhandle, and that's partially due to our ridging that's moving farther and farther to the east. That's in the Gulf of Alaska on Monday. High pressure centered just to the north of south central Alaska, where south central will still remain dry on Monday, as well as much of southwest Alaska. But the Alaska Range and places farther to the north are going to see rain extending from the Seward Peninsula area throughout all of the interior and up through much of the North Slope as well. Down in the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, the multiple lows are going to bring continued rain throughout the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. Finally, on Tuesday, we have low moving into the southern Bering Sea, continuing to provide widespread rain through the Bering Sea, as well as the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Then we have a new system coming up from the south that's going to bring an additional push of moisture to the Kodiak Island area and start to bring rain back to the Kenai Peninsula and south central Alaska throughout the day on Tuesday. Then we all have some of that rain extending up through southwest Alaska and then through the west coast up through the Kotzebue Sound area and some spotty areas around the interior. North Slope will finally start to see some reprieve from the rain as high pressure moves in, and continued dry conditions for the Panhandle are expected on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.